This polygamist cult story is so shocking and heartbreaking that for the first time ever, it brought me to tears on camera. Just imagine a world where your grandpa is an American cult leader, obsessed with illegally populating the planet through his prolific pedigree. Then I want you to picture your family tree as more of a family farm, where the ground is fertile in federal crimes and sickening secrets. But this farm doesn't produce produce, it produces people, hundreds of people. This bizarre scenario sounds absolutely crazy, but for my guest today, it was his lived reality. Buckle up, because what I've told you so far is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Hugh's chilling and extraordinary experience. And I'm about to break the ice. If you're watching today's episode, you'll notice something a little bit different. Hugh asked to remain anonymous, so I've blurred his face, changed his name, and left out any type of identifying information about him or his family. It's important to remember that although these cult experiences may have a gripping narrative that we're fascinated by, protecting the welfare of all my guests remains my absolute top priority. So I've never talked to anybody whose grandpa started a cult. I never talked to anybody whose grandfather was a cult leader, so this should be interesting. Is that your claim to fame, or?
Yeah, basically. I mean, I peaked already, so.
There's no up from here, my guy. I'm sorry. It's all downhill from here. Unless you become a cult leader yourself. Your family is a family of leaders. I will give them that.
I mean, yeah, that's accurate. I don't know if it's the best kind of leader.
Maybe you can change the game on leadership and maybe not be the cult leader type of man in the family, which it doesn't seem like you are, so I think you're off to a good start.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Let's start from the beginning.
Yeah, the beginning. I don't know if everyone knows what polygamy is or exactly how that looks. I think most people have heard of the Utah Mormon stereotype of polygamy. So we're not talking about the LDS Church. We're talking about groups of traditional fundamentalist people that branched off because they disagreed with the LDS Church. My family was one of those groups. There's like the FLDS Church, which is the main one. And my family kind of branched off from that and kind of did its own thing. My grandpa kind of left and took his whole family with him. And that's kind of where the context we're looking at.
So there was never a conversation of, hey, you now follow me, I'm a cult leader. But we know that that's typically not how cults work anyway, or how like high control groups are started anyway. But there usually is a charismatic person at the center of it all that people look to.
Yeah, and that's very much my grandpa. He would never call himself a cult leader, and we would never have called ourselves a cult. But the practices were very cult-esque, and it was a very insulated, very hidden from the world kind of a group of hyper-religious stuff going on. Going to church in my uncle's garage, getting preached to by all my uncles and my grandpa, having our own like ceremonies and things, our own way to do marriages, and our own way to like those kind of ceremonies. Probably not like a sacrifice or anything crazy, but
you never know. Nothing surprises me anymore.
You never know.
And when you say like different marriage practices related, I'm assuming to polygamy because it's not entirely legal.
Yeah, no, polygamy when I was younger was a felony. Like that's kind of a big deal. Putting someone away in actual prison, taking them from their family. It's very much a secret. It's kept a secret. My cousins will call their second mom aunt so-and-so, or you know, they won't tell people when they're in like public school or something that they're a polygamist family. We were very encouraged to keep everything we did a secret. And there's a lot of mistrust for the world in a polygamist family. Like, I mean, for some good reason. In recent history, the FBI raided my family's home, as well as like lots of other people's homes. Raided and arrested all the polygamists in Utah a while back. You know, my grandpa told me, like when he was 10 years old, he woke up to a flashlight in his face, dragged him out. They arrested everybody. His older brothers had to rescue my great grandma. They don't have any.
What do you mean they rescued her from the cops?
They, yeah, my grandpa's older brothers. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they slashed cop cars and then they got her out. They like escaped with her from the cops.
Wonder how many felonies that was.
Probably many. It was a crazy day for them.
That's insane. Yeah.
Yeah, my great grandpa arrested and was in there for 5 years. They still talk about it. Like it's a new and recent thing. They still talk about it like. Yeah, it still scares them to this day. So
they feel persecuted essentially for their extreme beliefs of like being polygamist.
And, you know, there's some truth to that. Like, everyone says we got freedom of religion here in America, but the practice of polygamy in and of itself isn't necessarily wrong. That is freedom of religion, right? They should
Sure.
be able to do that, honestly. The problem is the stuff that comes with it.
There's the whole underage, what is the law called? Did you say it's the Romeo and Juliet law?
Yeah, that's what people kind of nickname it here. But yeah, it's kind of a law you can use to get a loophole around underage marriage. They don't even have to use that usually because polygamous marriages are secret and they're not legal. Polygamy already is illegal. So this is a ceremony that my family's doing on their own. There's no paper
Right.
that they need to validate their marriage. It's more religious. It's like a religious thing.
Right.
So grooming, underage, yeah, that kind of stuff. It's pretty common to see.
What
Yeah.
what would that look like in that type of closed off family? It seems like it's pretty internally based with family and all of these particular values and religious rules. And so I'm sure it doesn't look like when you're on the inside, it never looks like grooming how us on the outside would see it. It just feels like, hey, this is the way of life. This is the natural progression. As a girl or as a woman, your whole goal is preparing for marriage and reproducing.
Yeah, pretty much. Raising baby factories. There's a phrase that's thrown around a lot. Nourish and replenish the earth. This idea of, like, it stemmed with the Mormons, this idea that we are the Latter-day Saints, we're the last followers of Christ, that we need to, we need to have lots of children. We need to fill this new Zion full of our seed or whatever. So, and that's kind of used to justify this grooming. And as well as like the polygamy and things like that, like lots of wives, even if they're young, just get lots of wives and get them having children fast because we've got to bring new Latter-day Saints into the world for God.
Right.
So that's the justification of it. And what it ends up looking like is highly patriarchal fathers trading daughters kind of a thing.
Women are property, essentially. You're the property of your father.
And their whole purpose is to have children for men.
I think a lot of the push to marry off girls when they're so young is because they can start producing faster. They have more childbearing years the younger you get them, essentially. It's basically, to me, it feels like human trafficking.
Doesn't get very far from it, honestly. I have family members who have actually said the phrase you hear. It's like, they're old enough to bleed, they're old enough to breed. Like, actually.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, I hate that.
No, yeah, no, it's
my
horrible.
God.
So there's a lot of that grooming that's just kind of built into the culture of it.
When did you first start noticing that that was an issue? Like, just being immersed in it, again, it doesn't feel necessarily weird or odd or bad when you're growing up in it because it's just the way of life.
Right.
It's the natural progression of things. You're seeing your dad, your brothers, your uncles, your grandfather all move in this particular way. At what point, clearly at some point, you decided this doesn't look right, this doesn't feel right, I don't like this, and I don't want to follow down the same path.
Yeah, I mean, with the grooming and things specifically, I had much older relatives that were very much in all of our business about that topic. I guess another piece of context thing that polygamists do is a little bit of incest too, or some of that. Like, I have multiple cousins that are married. Not legally, of course. Yeah, married with children. That
Like
kind
first
of thing.
cousins?
Yep, first cousins. That's a whole other egg to just crack open.
But I mean, yeah, but I mean, where else are you going to get wives from? If everything is
Exactly.
illegal and you're just operating internally, then the pool of opportunity is shrinking.
It's still from that same thing of just like, we need to nourish and replenish the earth. These are the people available, so let's get them having children. Yeah,
Whatever
so
means necessary.
I would have uncles telling me like, "Oh, your cousin's kind of cute. You should, like maybe someday," and things like that. Just like very involved in that part of my life. And I'm a guy, so much less for me than they were for them. Like my female cousins or my sisters or things. Yeah, no, they would say things and they would treat it like they had way more of a say in that side of their lives than they did. That's kind of where the grooming kind of comes in. Everyone around you, your dad, all these people that you respect, telling you exactly what you should want from a very young age.
Then you don't really have a choice. You don't get to decide what you want. You get told what you want.
I mean, I was just doing what my family was telling me to. I was too young really to decide for myself. But as I got older, probably like 12 to 14 area, I kind of started to notice some of that stuff more. The main thing that bothered me was noticing the difference between how I was treated and how my sisters were treated. I would be coming to some family function. I just sit down and eat and hang out with all my cousins while they had to go take care of all the kids, or like my word was deferred to a bit more. I was treated with a bit more respect. I felt like it wasn't fair to them, particularly as I got older and I started to kind of explore other ways of thinking. They believe in the Bible. They've kind of got their own take on it. The polygamy justified with all the polygamy you can find in the Bible. But then they also believe in like the Book of Mormon as well. They do follow that, and it's same there. It's a completely different, very extremist take on both of those books. Probably the most noticeable thing you would find in a polygamous family, just first impression of it, is the very stark gender roles, the separation of gender. You can picture me sitting there at my grandpa's house, big long table, and really at that table he's got his, like my grandma, he was a polygamist, but he isn't anymore. His other wives either died or left, so he's just got the one. So he'll have his wife with him, and then it's like his sons, not his daughters necessarily, but his sons are going to be next to him on the other side. And for men, like it was a competition of like my uncles who was going to sit next to my grandpa, and he would kind of use that, and they would fight each other for that seat or for his approval. For like men in this polygamous family, it's just very competitive. You're expected to be this patriarch of your family, a leader of your family. Like they would admit that they're a patriarchy. Like they think that's how it should be. They put lots of pressure on their men to be achievers, to be leaders of their family, to be spiritual leaders too. So like my uncles would always be competing for my grandpa's love, for his affection. Really everyone in my family was competing for my grandpa's affection, but especially his sons. They all wanted to be the favorite son. There was a time we went on a road trip, and they were battling over who was going to be the next car in the convoy we were in as we all drove down the freeway, just because they wanted to be closer to my grandpa. And then for women, I have aunts that I've barely heard speak in my whole life. They're just so incredibly repressed and put in their little box. There's many of my relatives that are female are afraid to speak up. A particular aunt that I've never heard speak, and she's just always getting so much criticism from her husband and from the other wives. Favoritism of wives. My uncle choosing one wife over another and then them getting super petty about it. Them dividing their children in their minds. Like, these are my kids, so I'm going to have my kid outperform your kid. So they're kind of competing with their children, trying to be the better mother, trying to get more love from their husband. It's very...
Oh my gosh, that sounds really toxic.
Yeah.
I think most of us on the outside, our experience of witnessing polygamy would just be on television, like Sister Wives or something like that. Just seeing bits and pieces of that show, there's clearly some jealousy and some competition between wives, but also between the sets of kids between the wives, like you said.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, how could it not be, right? Like, imagine being a wife that's got to share her husband and keeps on getting treated like a lesser wife just because she's not the first one, or just because she's not the favorite one. You can see it destroy them. And I guess sister wives, my aunts that have the same husband, they'll like sit on the other side of the room from each other.
So they really don't like each other at all.
There are some exceptions of like ones that get along much better than the others, but all of them have problems with each other. All of them hate each other, at least in some way.
So how do these men decide when it's time for another wife, or who's going to be the other wife? Because like you said, they justify it biblically, but it's clearly a one-sided type of polygamy because the wives aren't allowed multiple husbands. They're like, okay, this is our religion, this is how it's supposed to be. I go into this knowing he's going to have multiple wives. But I imagine internally that feels really, really fucking horrible. And it probably feels like a betrayal. He's still cheating on you somehow, and they may not even think those exact thoughts, but I imagine it probably carries a similar feeling.
It's not good. And it is very much a selfish, one-sided arrangement. They treat it like it's religious. They justify it with scripture. They have all of that to lean on. But at the end of the day, they just can't keep in their pants. At the end of the day, they are cheating on their spouses. Men have no obligation of loyalty. A man can go out and he can do whatever he wants with anybody because he might be looking for that second wife that God wants him to have, you know.
Right.
But women, they're expected to be extremely loyal. It's kind of hard to get behind when you've got such a selfish arrangement there.
And then the men still put themselves so high up on the pedestal in every aspect. Like you said, just the ritualistic things, like how the seating is done at the table. As a girl, you're expected to come to these things prepared to care for the men or care for the babies. Like, they're really preparing these young girls to be moms. They're already filling a mom role and filling a parental role, honestly, and how they have to care for the other children.
There are so many siblings, right? I'm one of 12. My mom had 9 herself. When you've got that many siblings, it's not like the parents can really take care of all of them.
Right.
So it's the older sisters. Older sisters are moms from very young ages. And these big, massive families, they tend to kind of get divided into age group sections, right? And so, like, since I'm in the younger half of my family, I was largely raised by my older sister.
And I feel that in my soul, because I'm the oldest daughter, or the oldest daughter of 8. I'm the second oldest, so I have an older brother. At one point, one of my younger siblings would start calling me mom when they were like real little, just because they didn't know the difference between who mom was. They just knew, a female is taking care of them. So it was like they're blurring the lines quite a bit in parental roles, especially, and we're being homeschooled. Weren't you homeschooled as well?
Yes, I was homeschooled for a number of years. I eventually did go back to public school. I very much wanted to, because it's not the best to be homeschooled, if anyone has been. Yeah, lots
Amen.
of polygamous homeschool.
How I was raised, it was the belief, like, we're kind of, the world is out to get us, and they're going to brainwash our children. Ironically, since, they're the ones doing the brainwashing at home. But anyway,
Right.
So that's why they wanted to homeschool us. But there might have been some of that on your end as well. But also, like you mentioned earlier, you were told not to tell anybody that you were polygamous, or that you were a polygamous family, or that you had other moms. They were aunts. And so I imagine some of that was probably a protective measure.
It was very much like a don't trust the rest of the world kind of a mentality. It came from that distrust they had of the government too. The FBI raids on my great-grandpa. They didn't think the government should be allowed to teach their kids because they didn't trust the government. And yeah, even my mom didn't really feel like public school was good for me. So she took me out and homeschooled me, which homeschool really is largely straight out of a Bible for that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
My mom's an amazing woman. And she taught me lots of other cool things. As well, I have older siblings, like my older brother, who he went to public school his whole life, and he really valued education, and so he did not like we were homeschooled, and he went out of his way to teach me. One of my older brothers taught me everything, like history. The other one taught me science and German and things.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you say German?
I don't speak it fluently or anything. I don't speak it very well anymore, but when I was younger, yeah. He would sit there and just teach me German.
The only second language I learned was Elvish from the back of the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
I was studying that for myself.
Oh my god! I swear, every homeschooler, we have the same experience with that. Oh my god!
Yeah, like trying to learn the calligraphy of it.
We're such nerds. Oh my god, that's bad. Now I even have like a half leg sleeve tattoo that's all Lord of the Rings theme. It's kind of like, so honestly, like some of the best parts of my childhood were just when I was disassociated, immersed in those books. That was kind of like my getaway, my escape from a lot of the other bullshit. Wasn't allowed to watch the movies until I was out of the house, really.
Literally same for me. Yeah, I had an older brother read me Lord of the Rings when I was extremely young, too.
I mean, that's impressive, because some of those names are hard to pronounce.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of songs, so I hope he serenaded you.
When I watch Lord of the Rings or read it now, I just hear his voice for Gandalf.
That's amazing. What a good brother. I got us sidetracked again. I can't help it.
The extreme difference in gender. That's what I was noticing when I was getting older. Just how different and unfair it was. A lot of that had to do with my mom. She was the one who first kind of started to step away. My mom never really full on supported the polygamy, but she never fought it either. It was like, you've got aunts and uncles who do this thing that's kind of different. I don't expect you to do it. Believe whatever you want to believe. Like, they're practicing their own freedom of religion or whatever. But she wouldn't tell me what to think on that growing up. But still, I spent a lot of time with my extended family. Like, it had to be every weekend for years. I was very close to them, and as a homeschooled kid, like, I didn't really have friends, I had cousins. I would spend a lot of time around them, and then I would get a lot of this expectation from uncles and my grandpa and everybody around me.
How many cousins do you have?
I was thinking about it and talking to family. It's closer to 200, I think.
Oh, that's all? That's all? It's just 200?
And then you forget all their names, and it's like cousins, and you feel bad, or it's like, okay, which one of Aunt so-and-so's kids are you?
That's too many. I couldn't.
I think the only person that knows everyone is my grandma.
Do all of them have biblical names? Is that like a theme? Do most of them?
Many do. There's also a lot of them that are named after their dads or things like that. I've got quite a few cousins that are all named after my grandpa. It's that same like competition thing with my uncles.
It's so weird to me. I've talked about this just in my personal life so many times. It's just like a soapbox I get on sometimes. But I'm like, why are men especially in like patriarchal groups like that, why are they so hell-bent on naming their children after themselves? Like, why? You're not special, you're not rich, you're not royalty, you're just a regular white guy. Like, why does it fucking matter? It just feels kind of narcissistic.
Yeah, especially like a first name
like,
too.
who are you? Yes,
yeah, I'm gonna just
exactly.
assign this child my identity. How about that?
Honestly, actually, I think you're onto something there. I think that's a lot of it too, because it creates a pressure and an expectation of the junior or the second or whatever you want to call it to basically be a replica of the senior.
Yeah.
And that's what they want. They want to create cookie cutter men and women. You don't need your own identity. I'm going to give you mine, and then you're going to become who I want you to become.
Right, because having your own opinion is against God. Having your own opinion is you're with all the Gentiles. You know, you're with all the people that hate on us and our way of life. You're an enemy now because you have your own opinion. And I think naming a kid after yourself. I mean, maybe not always. I'm sure there are plenty of people that do it with good intentions, but in polygamy family,
I need to say that because people are going to come for me.
It happened. Like, maybe you're so and so the fourth. Like, there are reasons why people do it that are not as strange, but it's projecting a future into a child.
Absolutely. There doesn't need to be like a Keith the second and Keith the third. You know what I mean? Like, what? Your name isn't even cool.
No, for real.
The number one question I always got as a homeschooled kid, and even now when people find out I'm homeschooled, they're like, well, how did you socialize? Did you feel like you socialized well? And I was always taught to say growing up, like, oh yeah, I socialize all the time. Like, I have tons of friends. Those friends were my siblings.
I know.
Or just kids at the church. Like, everyone's in this bubble. That's not really socializing in a healthy way.
No,
when
it's
you're
not
in the same
finding
bubble.
friends or like going out and
learning how relationships work in any way.
And of course, like they're gonna want to justify why they're doing that because it's their whole worldview. So they're going to combat all of the anti-homeschool things that you hear. So you sit there believing it like, oh yeah, I can socialize. Great. Look how many siblings I have. How could I not socialize if I have this many siblings? You're very, very insulated, very closed off.
And you're not hearing any outside perspective of anything. It's just an echo chamber.
Yeah, pretty much.
24/7. And
every homeschool mom has deficiencies on what they're teaching. Like these aren't licensed teachers. They're just people.
And that's the same even with public school. And there's faults with public school as well. I don't want to make this conversation just about homeschooling or anything, but that's also a hill I'm willing to die on. I'm not anti-homeschool. I'm not just like love public school. My son goes to public school, but there's plenty of faults with public school. But my personal experience was the dangers and the mistreatment and the educational neglect that came with homeschooling, and that thousands and thousands of other homeschoolers have also experienced. That was not unique to me at all.
No.
But even in public school, they don't expect one teacher to teach all the subjects. As a whole, we recognize one person isn't capable of providing enough education on all of these subjects.
No, exactly. And it kind of limits you moving forward in life. Transitioning back to public school, I had to learn like 5 years of education in a single year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you go back to public school? What age?
I went back for half-time, so not really back fully. But I started kind of going back when I was a 6th grader.
You're always playing catch up. Even now
Yeah.
as an adult, I always feel behind on everything. I mean, we didn't learn geography or any, like, there's so many areas they didn't even try to teach.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like I'm constantly behind, or I feel like I'm so ignorant to a lot of things that are just well known among people who actually received an education.
Yeah, no, I failed to graduate high school largely because of that until later when I got my GED. But, like, I was still playing catch-up all the way through high school, and I didn't fully catch up. My parents, they were starting to have marital issues. I mean, my dad, he's great for a lot of reasons. He's a great dad in a lot of ways. One thing he was doing at the time, though, was he was kind of just getting sucked in a bit. I don't know how much he participated in the actual religion side of it. He was buddies with all my mom's brothers. To an extent, that would hurt her, just because of how much he bought into these ideas they were feeding him sometimes. And I do remember it. There were some things that he would tell me when I was younger that started to sound more and more like my uncles. Things like, us doomsday prepping. He got really into the doomsday prepping, just like how they were, kind of. And I don't want to like throw him under the bus too much, but this was a while ago, and my parents were starting to have these marital issues. I didn't really fully understand why, but there was this one day where, little 12, 13-year-old me was kind of dragged along with my mom to go visit her parents. That kind of thing I think we've all been through. You don't really have much of a say in it. You're just, okay, get in the car.
Right.
And she takes me over to my grandpa and grandma's, and they start talking. I don't think my mom is aware that I heard the conversation. I was supposed to be upstairs hanging out with my cousin, and we were hanging out. I was on his iPad playing Minecraft or something, but we were on like the stairs landing, the halfway point where she couldn't really see me, but I could hear everything she was saying. And yeah, I remember my mom telling her parents about her getting cheated on by my dad. And they did not take it well. They were not helpful to her. I remember my grandma, she tried a bit harder to be more empathetic. She was like, I'm so sorry, I know this hurts, I've been there, I understand, but this is what God wants, kind of a take on it. Whereas my grandpa was very brutal. He was brutal to her. Made it seem like it was her fault that she was cheated on. From his perspective, I mean, polygamy, like, cheating isn't really a thing for a guy. And so he straight up told her something along the lines of, maybe you wouldn't have cheated if you didn't make it so easy. And even young me was like, whoa.
Oh my God.
My mom was tearing up and crying down there, and I could hear it. And yeah, very much upset that she went to her parents for some advice, for some consolation, and what she got was just complete rejection of her feelings, completely invalidated. Yeah, that very much upset her.
Oh my gosh.
That was when I started kind of seeing outside of it. That's when I kind of started realizing, like, okay, they're not treating me the same as my sisters. Like, this is, something's a little weird here. And I, empathizing with my mom there and realizing, like, oh, that, like, this worldview is causing them to say that. Something might be a little bit wrong here. But then things also changed in my family at that point. After that conversation with her parents, my mom started kind of pulling us all back. She didn't say I couldn't have a relationship with my family. She just stopped prioritizing going over. And, like, I still went over there with, like, older siblings sometimes, or there were rare occasions where she would take us over, but it was just very restricted after that.
And I'm not in her shoes, I don't know. But I imagine that felt pretty bold on her end as well, just to even pull back. Because she's not just pulling back from cousins and extended family, but her parents who chose her cheating husband and defended her cheating husband over their own daughter.
It's not good. I mean, they're all still friends with my dad, even after they don't
So
even see
messed up.
their daughter.
Why does religion take priority over blood, over family, over your child, no matter how old they are?
I think it's that same thing I was talking about. It's this idea that if you're not with us, you're against us. Like, she very much became black sheep of the family. She's a bad guy now. My extended family will talk some major shit about my mom all the time, and they've said some horrible things to me after we kind of distanced ourselves just because I was associated with that. Yeah, just the audacity of her thinking for herself wasn't allowed.
It's like using God to justify being a horrible person to your family, to your children, your spouse. When you're in it, it's just like, again, it's just kind of like this echo chamber of toxicity, and people really feed into that and kind of work each other up about it. So if there's someone who stands up for themselves and stands up against shitty behavior, like, how is me saying, hey, my husband cheated on me, I don't feel great about that, and then that suddenly gets twisted into, you're the enemy, you're against the rest of the group.
Yeah, no. Like, her being upset that she was cheated on, that happens a lot in polygamy. I mean, first wife still being really butthurt about having a second wife to deal with, or butthurt, very hurt. Genuinely hurt. It's pretty common for this to be bothering women, but
sure.
Yeah, her really setting a boundary is what they were fighting.
Yeah. Don't you dare do that.
Yeah.
That's what we don't believe in, is boundaries.
Yeah.
Could you explain the difference, I guess, for me anyway, how is that defined in a polygamist relationship? What is cheating versus polygamy? Since there's no legality to it, it's not polyamorous like you said. So if the husband and wife are in a known polygamist group or relationship or religion, and the husband steps out, what is considered cheating until, is it just identifying that, hey, this is another wife, and then it doesn't become cheating? Like, what are the parameters?
I prayed for it and God said it was okay. It's not cheating. That's literally it. It's really never cheating for the guy, because they can just say God told them so.
I prayed about it and God said I could stick my dick wherever I want.
Pretty much.
I'm sure.
They're all just
I'm sure.
disloyal, cheating guys that can't keep in their pants, and so they get away with it. And then with women, there's no leadway at all. Like, even talking to another guy in a weird way can be bad for some of the more extreme cases. Obviously, that depends on the marriage, but for most of my aunts, they couldn't even have the suspicion of being disloyal.
Well, like you said earlier, everything is blamed on the women anyway. If the husband does cheat, then what did you do to make him cheat? Or what were you not fulfilling in his life that caused him to step out? Always comes back to victim blaming every single time.
Every single time. No, and there's, I won't go into too many specific details because they're real people that I'm not going to tell the story of. But yeah, there's so many examples of SA that have happened in this kind of a group. I don't think you'd be surprised hearing that, but it's just so common.
I know, it's really sad too, especially in a family type of situation.
Yeah, that just makes it all the more evil. Incest, that's not really incest to them. At this point, I was not going to church with my family as much. We were pulling back, with my extended family. I was sort of Mormon at this point in my life. I was going to a Mormon church, reading the Book of Mormon and all of that stuff, but applying all of that to the things I knew from my polygamist cult, basically. I would go to the Mormon church, but have not really agree with them, is kind of what I was doing at that point.
You were diet Mormon.
I was diet Mormon, yes. Yeah, I was diet Mormon, and I was, that was just kind of the next step of me stepping away more and more. And that I started going back to public school and hearing opinions that were not my extended family's, not my crazy grandpa's. Yeah. And so I started stepping back more and more. My parents did end up getting a divorce. It was devastating for my mom, for them to still be siding with my dad all through that. Their marriage, their drama, whatever. But even if my dad's not completely the bad guy in it, they're still her family. That's her mom and her dad. You side with your daughter.
Right. Because, like you said, if she had been the one that cheated, they wouldn't have sided with her.
No, they wouldn't have. We weren't fully out yet, but we were kind of laying the boundaries a lot more strong. One after another, we all kind of started pulling back. And really what kind of ended things once and for all for us was pretty recent. My sister is transgender, and on her birth certificate it said male, but female. And my extended family were not okay with that in any way. Very much dehumanized her for it. And it was pretty devastating for her. And yeah, she didn't make it. She ended herself or whatever a couple of years ago. And almost all of my extended family boycotted her funeral. They refused to go. Despite a lifetime of knowing her, despite helping raise her, despite being like her best friend when we were homeschooled and all we had was cousins, that didn't matter to them. An actual life didn't matter enough to them to show up to a damn funeral. And that's hard. You can't walk back from that. Like, there's no more clear way to decide this is wrong. Like, at least for me, not only did that absolutely destroy my relationship with most of my family, it made it clear as day to me that whole worldview is dysfunctional and broken. After that my whole family is cut off from almost all of them. There are a few of them that did come. My grandma came.
I would be the same way. That's completely unforgivable, in my opinion. I have a trans brother, and my family has treated him very similarly. Ostracized him, won't acknowledge him, dead names him, and so loyal to a false sense of righteousness that the value of a human life, even in death, isn't there's no value to it, really. If you don't believe exactly like they believe, then you don't matter. You deserve to die. You brought this on yourself. That's kind of the mentality. Disgusting and unforgivable, in my opinion. And I'm so sorry you had to not just lose your sister, but then the aftermath of that. I can't imagine how that feels. Like, you lose so much of your family after that.
Kind of makes it hard to see them as family if they're not going to act like it. It's eye-opening because then you start to see that it never really meant anything the whole time.
Right.
Because the pattern, it goes far back. There's so many examples of how they would put their skewed beliefs above the people in their lives. The unconditional love, no, it was never that. It was always conditional. And it was always revolving around this weird worldview that they're all so incredibly convicted to.
Is there anything you want to share about your sister? Is that something you're comfortable sharing, just to keep saying her name and keep bringing value to who she was as a person?
Yeah, she was an amazing person. So, yeah, she was named after that great grandpa that got the FBI break down his door and things, got arrested. But yeah, obviously that's the dead name. She was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and an incredible artist too. Like, she was working on a graphic novel that absolutely would have made it. And she just cared so much about it. She had like all these characters in the graphic novel that she would tell me about. We were very close in age. I'm slightly older, but only by like a year. So we kind of grew up like twins, especially like before the transition when we were seen as like brothers. We looked very similar. It was like we knew all the same people. We wore the same jeans, shared a bunk bed for most of our childhood. She was like a childhood best friend to end all best friends. We were incredibly close for good reason, because she just made it so easy. She was like assertive and stubborn about a lot of things, but you'd sit there and you'd argue with her and then you'd realize, oh no, she's right. Like every time. You'd be right.
Oh shit. Am I going to have to apologize?
Yeah. And yet while she was so like assertive about things, she was also like incredibly empathetic and took care of people. Including me. There were some things I was going through, not too long before that. She would just stay up with me all night, just waiting to make sure I came home safe when we were living together in an apartment. Even with all the crazy things she was going through. She would take care of people. Take care of everybody except for herself, really.
She sounds amazing.
Yeah.
When was her birthday? Just so we can celebrate every year.
July 21st.
Ooh, mine's the 17th. Mine's July 17th, so...
Yeah.
We're pretty... yeah, we're,
You're both
right
Cancer?
She's a Cancer.
Yeah.
Yes!
I mean, me too.
See, I sensed it. Wait, you're a Cancer too?
Yeah, no, almost exactly a year apart, so my birthday is just in June. June 27th.
Okay, so you're right on the cusp. And that's funny, my trans brother, his is July 3rd, so he's a Cancer as well. Yeah, we're all just clustered right in there.
Parents were collecting cancers.
For real. I mean, it's bound to happen when you have that many kids, especially, but I even have two brothers that were born 11 years apart, but on the same day.
Really?
Like November 27th. Yes, isn't that weird? And it's not like my mom did all home births besides me and my older brother, but all the rest of them were born at home, so it was like not planned or anything. It just
happened.
Like, well, y'all were obviously fucking at the same time every year, I guess.
Almost all of my sisters were born on the 19th of their month. Almost every single one of them. It's just crazy.
No, I was just going to say, I wish your sister was still here, but I think she's very lucky to have a brother like you that's still advocating for her and speaking up for her and respecting her decisions and her identity in a loving way. And she deserved that from everybody, but got it from so few people that were supposed to love and care about her, and that's truly tragic and heartbreaking.
No, I mean, I think that's a lesson to be learned, right? Like there are people that you might disagree with, but you can't let your skewed worldview diminish the value of a human person. You know, there are things more important than your beliefs.
And honestly, like, at the end of the day, Jesus was hanging out with the poor and the prostitutes, and, like, you know what I mean? Like, how is that? It's just crazy to me. Just as a human, I can't justify in my mind treating someone who believes differently than me, or not even believes, but just who lives a different life than me and makes different decisions than me. Why does that automatically make them a bad person or wrong? There's no possible way we're all going to follow the same path and believe the same things and make the same decisions, even about the same things.
Yeah, not even Christians can get along.
Exactly. Jesus didn't treat people like this.
No.
And that's the whole takeaway as Christians, is you're supposed to be Christ-like. And hate was never Christ-like.
Yeah.
Ostracizing family and your loved ones was never Christ-like. I can't, like, it just does not.
The mental
gymnastics. I just don't get it.
Yeah, like.
Truly. Truly. Like, they could compete in the Olympics. Like, that level of mental gymnastics.
Yeah, no, for real. And it extends to so many different things. Racism and homophobia and all of that.
Yes.
Like, I had an uncle who was in a gang while he was in high school, and he was, like, literally committing hate crimes against Mexicans and crazy things like that. Or my uncle that had a significant other, I don't remember if it was a wife or a girlfriend, but he was doing business in China. And while he was in China, he met somebody and, like, had a kid. And my family completely ostracized her. Like, pretended like she didn't exist when he went back and told his family about her. Just because she was Asian. For no other reason. They got a Bible verse, of course, to justify it. Like, black people are descended from Cain or some bullshit.
And then there's the whole, like, unequally yoked. I heard that one too. Yeah. My parents were always very adamant about, like, not courting or marrying or reproducing with anybody that wasn't Caucasian, because that's being unequally yoked. And why would you... And like, my mom has outright said, if you ever have children, and she even told this to my trans brother, if you ever have children, those are no grandchildren of mine. And she has the same mindset about any grandchildren that aren't Caucasian. Yeah. It's like that she won't recognize their, which, granted, she doesn't recognize mine or my son's existence anyway, but she's made it very clear how racist that mindset is. And again, it's all justified biblically. There's always a justification. There's a biblical justification for being a shitty person.
Right, because that book is thousands of years old, and they were all racist back then. Of course you can find justifications for racism. That doesn't mean it's from God. That just means it's from a bunch of, racist people that were, like, miles away from anyone different from them. Yeah,
there's also a shit ton of genocide in the Bible. Yeah. But are we pro-genocide now, or what?
Like, what, should I go murder all the firstborn children of the whole culture? Like,
Right. right. Prime example of cherry picking, which they love to do.
They sure do. It just makes them all the more difficult to get along with.
And the older I get and the more separated I am from it, I'm like, I don't think I could even be in the same room with these people at this point, because I'm not going to fight you, but I'm going to look at you like you're stupid, and I'll probably tell you that you are.
Yeah, no, because I mean, you got dumb opinions, I'm going to tell you that.
Yeah, I'm going to let you know.
Especially if it's hurting people.
Or if you're being racist, I'm going to let you know.
Yeah, no, for real. And just all of those things kind of stack up when you're pulling yourself out of that kind of a mindset. Mm-hmm. And you start to realize how many things you've just let them convince you of that are not right.
That's a big struggle too. Like, what has that been like for you since you've kind of gravitated out of that? Then how do you undo, like, being that immersed into the patriarchal mindset as a man? Like, how do you reverse that, or how do you unpack all of that? Yeah, no,
it's a whole lifetime of ingrained toxic masculinity that's all just kind of shoved down your throat. It's passed from one person to the other. You know, you got an abusive, crazy uncle that's doing crazy things to your cousin, so your cousin's doing it all to all of his younger kids or younger siblings. And you know, same thing for me. Like, just that toxic masculinity passed down from them to my family to older brothers to me, and it's just everyone in your whole life expects you to be that way. Just the extreme emotional repression. You know, I would get hit just for crying. Like, I feel like that happens to other people too, but that kind of stays with you. And other things too, like expected to achieve, expected to be in charge and in control, and the competition of it. I don't want to get like the imposter syndrome on myself too much, because I feel like there are people that have it much worse than I did, but it still impacts me. And maybe that's evidence of it right now, me belittling the thing I went through. But yeah, it's over years you're kind of built into this. You don't make a crazy cultist leader overnight. My grandpa, he didn't come out of nowhere. He wasn't just born like that, using people and having his children fight each other for his affection, you know, justifying terrible things with religion. It happens over a lifetime of justifying hate and that toxic using of other people, the manipulation of other people, and having people in your life encouraging it, but then also accepting that and deciding that that's who you want to be. That's where you make a cult leader. That's where you make an abusive person like that. And so for me, it's been a long uphill battle fighting that, especially when I was fortunate enough to have like a mom that pulled me out of that mindset, a mom that kind of led us all away. I was able to kind of see that way of thinking is wrong. It doesn't do anything but hurt people. And also it hurts me for pressing that much. Those kinds of expectations for myself. I really just needed to have a long fight with myself to become more healthy so that I could be more healthy to others.
There's so much shame that's attached to it too when you don't fit the bill of what's been taught to you as what masculine looks like and how masculine behaves. There's all of these feelings, I imagine, of not being enough or being manly enough or experiencing emotions when you've kind of suffocated them for so long. A cult leader isn't made overnight, but neither is an emotionally repressed person. Like, that's years and years and years of being told that that's wrong.
Yeah, and you're calling me out on something that I still struggle with, but no, it's like therapy.
You're not the only one. It's not a call out to you personally.
No, of course. No. I'm definitely a repressed person still, even though I try not to be. But the things that help, especially coming from families like these or groups like these, therapy I feel like is often discouraged. I don't think it's just my family that was anti-therapy. And once therapy became an option for me, that definitely helped. As well as the self-awareness of it. Metacognition, I think, is what it's called. Just spending time in your own head, thinking about how you think, and correcting the harmful thoughts to yourself and the harmful thoughts to others.
Look at you using big therapy words. I love it. We love to see it.
It's been a long journey.
Yes, same. I think I've been in therapy like probably 8 or 10 years. Sometimes I'm like, have I learned anything?
I know.
Has it been for nothing? Sometimes I feel like I haven't progressed at all.
But then you think back to how you were
But-
4 years ago or 10 years ago, and you're like,
Yeah.
damn, I'm so much better. I'm so much happier.
Yeah.
Got my shit together way
I did
more.
that. Not being allowed to come up with your own opinions or your own belief set or deciding what's right and wrong for you completely destroys any trust that you have with yourself. So I don't know about you, but I know for me personally, that's been one of the biggest undoings. And what I would say is deconstructing, if you will, is just what is trusting myself? What does that even mean? What does that look like? And how does that show up in day-to-day life? Because you don't really go through life thinking, I don't trust myself. Then you start, through therapy, you start recognizing various decisions or different mindsets that you have are actually tied back to having no trust with yourself and having not knowing how to follow your intuition or your gut feelings or what do I even want? Because all of these decisions have been made for you for so long.
Right.
They were already decided what you're going to do and how you're going to act. And then suddenly when you get out, you're like, oh shit, I have to decide things for myself, and I don't know what that looks like.
100%. There's a reason why I've got uncles that fight over the spot in the convoy line on the road trip. Getting out, they might think back and be like, oh, I was doing that for someone else the whole time. And it was kind of the same for me. Like, I got out and was like, oh, I believed these things. I structured my whole worldview against bullshit people were shoving down my throat. For somebody else. And it's only when you start taking care of yourself and forming your own opinions, living your own life the way you want to, that you can kind of escape some of that.
And being nice to yourself, I think, is part of that, which is hard to do. But like, we were kids. You were a child. Like, it wasn't like you were a whole ass adult choosing to believe these things. Like, you were a kid.
Yeah, in fact, I'm pretty proud of myself that when I got old enough to have an opinion, I dipped out. You know? And it
exactly.
wasn't
You're like,
entirely me.
nope.
My mom's influenced a lot on that, but still, decision I made.
Yes, you should be proud of yourself. That's huge. Yeah. Like, even you had explained before that your mom kind of gave you the autonomy, especially when she started pulling away, to decide for yourself. She didn't really influence you to follow the road of being a polygamist, but also didn't discourage you from it. It was kind of like, hey, this is my decision to pull back, and then you can decide for yourself what you want, which I love parents who give their children the autonomy to decide. Yeah. So it sounds like she did a great job letting you figure out what was right for you, and you chose right.
Yeah, in fact, she went out of her way to make sure that was the case. Like, if I wanted a relationship with my extended family, I could have it. I did continue to see them for a while after she stopped with, like, older siblings and things. She made it my decision, for sure. Yeah. If I had wanted to stay, I could have. But I didn't.
And again, credit to you for having some self-awareness, but also perception of what was going on around you to recognize this is not healthy. I don't want to repeat this pattern. Yeah. And I don't like how the women around me or your sisters or your mom were being treated, and recognizing the injustice of that is a huge credit to you as a human as well.
Thank you. I mean, seeing your mom cry does things. Changes opinions.
I know, it kind of breaks my heart that you heard that conversation, because that's a tough conversation for adults to be in, but for a child, for you to hear that and then know that your mom is on the receiving end of that bullshit.
Yeah. No, it's been a long, crazy journey.
Looking back on everything, or maybe it's more recent, I don't know. Like, what do you think is the biggest, I don't want to say lesson, because I don't think we're put on earth to just learn fucking lessons.
That sounds like something the cultists
if we are... Right. Everything's a lesson. Well, if it's not Satan working, then it's God teaching you a lesson. If I have one more trial or tribulation, so help me. No, sometimes life just fucking sucks, man.
I know. I guess for the biggest takeaway, you are who you make yourself. I've been there, surrounded by people that want to shape me into themselves. It's so easy to get manipulated into a worldview. But at the end of the day, you only believe something when you want to. I would want to give people the permission that my mom gave me to have your own autonomy in shaping yourself. I think it's very important for a person to find their own path. And when you're surrounded by people that don't let you, get out. It'll be better for you. Mm-hmm. And as a a man in one of these families, in one of these groups. I got the better end of the stick. Men, they really have it easier than women do in these kinds of situations. I could have lived my whole life, you know, sleeping with whoever I wanted to sleep with and really getting anything I wanted. But it wasn't right. And I really had to find that. I really had to let myself disagree with the people in my life that had been telling me otherwise the whole time. You don't make an abuser, a manipulator overnight. You let yourself become that. You are what you make yourself. Yeah, I guess if there's anybody who's kind of being coerced in that kind of way or led towards a certain worldview, they don't own you or your mind. You do.
I love that. Permission to disagree, permission to question.
Yeah, even if it's someone that you highly respect and trust.
Because we're not supposed to be living for another human being.
No.
You know what I mean? Besides, like, yeah, our kids, like, we'll do anything for our kids type of thing. But not another white man. Guys, come on. Right?
Making sacrifices to the ones you love, that's one thing. But compromising, I mean, like your identity and very soul for someone else's book. Right. Yeah. No, that's not good for you.
No, not at all. I heard someone say one time, a belief is just a thought you keep thinking. And I was like, holy shit, it really is. Like, there's so many various beliefs out there, and everyone thinks their belief is the belief, the right way, the religion. But really, any belief that we hold about any topic, religion or not, is just something that we keep affirming in our head. It's just thoughts we keep thinking over and over. When you start thinking different thoughts, you start thinking for yourself, you start setting boundaries, then some of those deeply set beliefs can start to unpack and unravel a little bit, and it's kind of just like pulling the thread, you know, out of a rug, and then it just, you know, you get perspective on other beliefs and other ways of life that aren't just that particular set of hardcore extreme beliefs anymore.
I know boundaries is kind of the buzzword right now, but like it really that's what these are built on. These cults, they're built on exploited boundaries, non-existent boundaries. It's built on using people because they don't have any defenses up, and those boundaries are necessary, absolutely necessary.
You've set boundaries, and I applaud you for it. It's not easy to do, and it's uncomfortable to do. And I'm proud of your mom too. She's not even here. I don't even know if she'll watch this, but I think she's a badass. Just the level of heartbreak and grief I'm sure she went through, and probably still does, with losing a husband, a family, things that are familiar, her parents, any sense of normalcy.
Definitely was badass. All with like a crumbling marriage too, and the picking up the slack for a lot of that too.
Letting you be who you are outside of all of those strict rules and brainwashing and things being decided for you. That's a gift.
It really was. She's incredibly good at that. And there are, like, I don't want to put her on some pedestal. Like, there are some pretty nasty and abusive parenting tactics that are commonplace in, like, polygamous families that she carried right over from her parents. So, yeah, I'm not going to make her out to be some, like, perfect person. But, yeah, that just makes her human. She's a pretty damn cool human. Like, she's done some really cool stuff, and that I think many people would find daunting that she just took in strides.
I don't want to put anybody on a pedestal either, because even the best people out there have faults and things. But I think the differentiator is, are people willing to recognize where they fucked up, and are they willing to do better? Are they willing to own their mistakes and apologize if necessary? And again, just like own your shit and then do better moving forward.
Definitely.
It doesn't right the wrongs. It doesn't right the abuse and the shit that's happened in the past, but at least it's a way forward.
Yeah.
If there's going to be a way, it has to come from the parents.
Exactly.
To create that way forward.
I don't expect my parents to be perfect. I just expect them to be working on it, you know, just like the rest of us. And that's really where my dad shines too. Self-reflection. The person that really both my parents were, but especially my dad, like a couple of decades ago when we were in the middle of all that culty bullshit, he was getting sucked into it. And, you know, he did cheat on his wife. There are things that he would say or do, like racist comments that my parents would make, or homophobic ones. I wasn't allowed to watch Princess and the Frog because I had a black princess.
Oh
Yet to see the people they are now, it's like night and day. Him cheating on his wife, watching his marriage fall apart, and then doing some hardcore self-reflection and figuring out, like, and he really does acknowledge the things he's done wrong. I've had big, long talks with him, and he, like, we've all heard a fake apology, but this guy gave me some, like, really genuine apologies, acknowledging everything he did to me and all the things he put us through, which is just so admirable. And now, like, a guy who would do some honestly really crazy shit for a religion, a guy that was just like getting fed all of this and he was just absorbing it all, to see the guy now who he's not even really in a religion because he believes what he wants to believe now. Like he's not atheist or anything. He does believe in God, but it's his version of God. And my mom she really does believe in her version of God. And that's just very admirable to see the night and day difference.
People can change if they want to change.
Yeah, they really can. That's why they're both in my life still. They're just more accepting of people than they were. It had a lot to do with their marriage falling apart, forced them into a lot of change, and losing children. Losing children, especially my sister. It's kind of hard to be transphobic after you lose a child to that, you know? Like, literally losing a child to transphobia.
Grief changes you.
It really does.
Grief absolutely changes you.
Not that you need that to change.
No.
It's possible to change.
But it forces you to.
But yeah, no, it opens your eyes quite a bit.
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't say it forces you to change. It forces you to look at yourself and look at your life and your decisions and how you treat people. Yeah. And it forces you to either self-reflect and change or...
rips away the facade.
And never heal.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
With the message trying to get across there with the toxic masculinity, it might be relevant information to add to it. There's a lot of physical abuse for men in polygamous families. Like, a lot. Like, for women too when they're younger. But like, you don't hit a woman, you don't hit a girl. Parents will spank girls, but for boys, they will, like, beat the shit out of them because they're boys. They're men, they should be able to take it. I think it might be relevant just to elaborate on how extreme that can be. I have a cousin that I was really close to, and after I had been separated from the family for a while, I reconnected with him, talked to him about this, because I know for a fact he had it worse than you can possibly fucking imagine. And he was just in so much denial about it. Like, I've seen it. I've seen him get the shit beat out of him, shamelessly in front of everybody. Like, can't even imagine what it's like at home with the doors closed. I talked to him and he recognized that it hurt and it sucked, but he just was not ready to acknowledge that it was wrong. And that's just so common. But like, some of my cousins too, like some of my uncles were a lot more vicious and cruel than my parents ever were. Like, humiliation. Like, I had a younger cousin he was 6, and he crapped his pants while we were at a family function. And in front of everyone, our whole family, the hundreds of us, my uncle stripped him down and hosed him down in front of everybody. Literally with a hose.
No.
This poor little 6-year-old. And he's 6. Oh. Crapped his pants. He's a 6-year-old.
I mean, that's extremely damaging physically, yes. Obviously, in the moment, while it's happening and right after, like, obviously that's extremely detrimental and abuse. But then what that does psychologically takes a lot. I mean, it takes a mental toll on a child while your brain is still developing. Yeah. You're being humiliated in front of hundreds of people and shamed relentlessly and hit and beat and just broken down. And then you have the conflicting, like, competition aspect of it.
And you're never allowed to tell anyone about it or feel or acknowledge your feelings.
Right.
It's not like they can talk about it because then they're pussies or, cry about it and they get hit again.
Exactly. That's what's crazy to me when people sometimes are like, well, I got the shit beat out of me and I turned out fine. No, you didn't. Right. Here's the thing, just because you're alive doesn't mean you turned out well. Just because you can hold down a job doesn't mean that you turned out well. You turned out fine. Yeah. You're not fine, buddy. You need therapy.
And whether you're fine or not, everyone else might not be.
Exactly.
Turns out
exactly right.
Hurting people is hurtful. Whoa.
Who knew?
Who fucking knew?
You get to a point where you decide, is this who I am? Am I going to continue this, or am I going to be different? Am I going to make different decisions? And I'm really happy you made different decisions. Yeah. Look at you now.
Thank you.
Look at you now.
Definitely not a polygamist.
Oh, really? There's still time. I mean, your best cult leader years could be ahead of you if you so, if you so choose.
No, I'm too damaged for that shit. I'm monogamy as fuck.
Did you say monogamy as fuck? I love it. That's hilarious. Oh, I'm stealing that. That's mine now. Thanks.
You're welcome. This is the story of my family more than anything. And everything from spending all our time together in horse pastures being homeschooled, all the ideas that we had to confront through our whole life, all of the challenges, the people we've lost. I think that we've become best friends. Me and all my siblings, particularly. My parents are great too, but something about siblings. We've been to hell and back, and we've emerged. It just makes me happy every day to see how much we've all grown. Yeah, the autonomy that we now have and the control we have over our own future. It's very empowering to see it work out in that way, Despite everything, I feel like we're doing good. And considering all that we went through, we probably shouldn't be doing good.
Not many people can say that coming from something that drastic and extreme. Like it's not common for people to have a happy ending, if you want to call it that. Like to be able to get out and to change in this big of a way.
To bring your whole family with
next
you,
to your siblings. Right.
That doesn't usually happen.
God, that's a win.
Yeah.
Well, I guess no cult in your future.
I know.
No cult leader here, guys. God. But there's plenty of gods to choose from. So if you change your mind, the world is your oyster.
I've landed soundly in agnostic, because then I can say, I don't need to know. I don't need to know. I don't need to make my whole life about knowing.
Yep.
I can just move forward and do my thing and be a good person. And any god that's up there that I want to follow, he'd respect that.
I'd like to dedicate this episode to the memory of Hugh's beautiful and loving sister, who continues to make an incredible and lasting impact on complete strangers like you and me. Research shows that 81% of transgender individuals have experienced suicidal ideation, 40% have attempted it, and LGBTQ+ youth are 2.5 times more likely to consider it compared to their straight, cisgendered peers. Contributing factors in all of those statistics include homophobia, discrimination, family, and religious persecution. If you or someone you know is struggling, or you would like to support your loved ones in a more inclusive way, I provided resources, but please feel free to drop your own resources in the comments. These stories can be really heavy, so I have a little palate cleanser for you right now. Check out this video on how I can make you a cult leader. Or if you want to dig deeper into the ex-Mormon side of things, this episode I did with Mikhail is exactly what you're looking for. Do drink your water, don't be a dick, and live, laugh, leave a cult.